Welcome to the SubHub podcast. I'm Dani Moreno.
And I'm EmKay Sullivan. And today we're going to do a little bit of a recap of the weekend as well as a preview for the upcoming U.S. Championship race in New York at Breakneck. But first, Dani, how are you feeling? You're, I think, almost 2 weeks off of Boston now. And I saw your post today about how recovery has been recovery. So tell us how it's been going.
Yeah, my body's feeling pretty good. I've been doing like a lot of fun activities. I've been learning how to skate ski, and anyone who skate skis probably laughing at the fact that I chose the very end of winter when the snow is mush to learn. Nevertheless, I'm learning a little bit before I embark on this road trip out to my wedding in a couple of weeks. And yeah, biking, snowboarding, running, just want to be outside with my friends. I find with like training, I don't know about you, like I don't get to do activities as much with some of my friends. So that's been pretty fun. And yeah, this weekend was like bittersweet. I was stoked, just cheering people on, following the results. Me and you got to do that live stream for the Sunapee Scramble, which we'll get into the recap for. So that was a really cool experience. But I did feel like I was left out of the action. I wanted to be in it. But you just got to trust your gut and know that you're doing the right thing by kind of sitting on the sidelines and stuff.
Yeah. That just means you're ready to like start training again, that you're feeling antsy a little bit.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. I love that.
Because like when you finish a race, you're just like, oh, I just need a break. And like, yeah, my rule's kind of like when you want to start running again, maybe give it a couple more days. So then you feel the itch and you really want to go for it.
Totally.
You also missed out on like the biggest winter Mammoth's ever had. So I'm sure it's been great to like pull out the snowboard and rip down the mountain a little bit.
Yeah, no, I can definitely attest that I was itching to snowboard the whole kind of Boston block, and we have plenty of snow too that I'm sure when we get back, but I'm sure by that time I'll kind of be deep in my Mont Blanc marathon training, but I'll try to make some time for the slush and stuff. How are you doing? I was running over the weekend for everyone listening for probably like my longest time on feet since Boston. And I was down south about 40 minutes in Bishop, and it was so hot. And I felt like such a baby because I was only out there for a little over an hour and I was dying. And I was just thinking about EmKay and all my friends running to canyons. How are you doing post that apocalyptic type heat wave that you guys experienced?
It was hot, that's for sure. That's like the first time in a long time that I've remembered to put sunscreen on for a race, because when I woke up and we started the race at 6 a.m. and it was already hot, and I was like, I should really protect my skin today. But yeah, no, I'm a little sick right now. I was a little sick leading into the race, but I really wanted to just knock my OCC qualifier out of the way to kind of put less pressure on the end of the year, and so I ran, I survived. The heat was actually the least of my worries because I was having a hard time breathing, but it was definitely hot. And you're talking about feeling like a baby. I was feeling like a baby because the 100K athletes were like suffering out there for so much longer than me and so much later. And I remember thinking like the course was actually more shaded than I thought it was going to be, which was nice. But I remember running through the trees and thinking, by the time the 100K athletes get to this side of the ridge, the sun will be here and they are going to be so hot. So I only had to deal with it the last 7 miles, which wasn't bad, but I did have to sprint finish. I didn't catch her, but I was really going for second place. And so once I crossed the finish line, because I'd been pressing for that last like 2-3 miles, like I immediately was like, okay, it's hot. I need to be covered in water. Like my husband was pouring a gallon water bottle just over my body. And I was like, I need the river is what I need. But it was a little far away.
I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I'm so glad you survived and you have your ticket to OCC, which is amazing because it just adds to what I think is a very strong American contingent who's already going to be there. So adding EmKay Sullivan to the mix is going to be even more fun for all of us racing and competing out there. So as part of our recap, we are going to talk about canyons because it was our first North American major as far as the UTMB series. So last year there was 2 majors. There was one in Val d'Aran earlier in Europe, which I think is like the beginning of June. And then there was another major in, I'm going to butcher this, I'm so sorry, Doi Ethanon, which was in Thailand. And that was in November. And so what makes the majors different from the rest of the races in the series is that the top 10 in what correlates to the OCC, CCC, and UTMB distances, and probably TDS. Actually, I'm realizing I haven't seen much on that, but it's those main ones that are getting kind of more the marquee marketing style treatment. If you're in the top 10 at one of these events, you get an automatic entry into those races. And so this being the first North American one, there was a lot of hype and excitement because it wasn't only that, but also coupled in the 100K, it was a golden ticket race. So it just seemed like there was a lot of storylines, a lot of people that were there, not only competing, but spectating. And the last thing I wanted to add is if you weren't competing for a top 10 spot, it also was double stones. So anyone who competed in, say, the 25K, instead of it being 1 stone, it was 2 stones, which that adds to your chances of getting picked for the race, not this year, but next year.
And I'm not totally clear on the new rules, but I also believe that the people who got top 10 can choose to go in 2024 instead of 2023 as well.
Oh,
so that's
nice.
Kind of new. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that's how it goes.
No, I mean, that's totally fair. For people who have been paying close attention to the UTMB series, I'm sure as you've seen, like the rules have been, let's say not changing, but evolving, I think, to be better suited for the landscape in the sport right now. So it seems like every week there's an update. One of the more exciting ones recently was the maternity option to like delay your entry, I think by 2 years potentially.
I think it was 5, and I think it was 2 years for partners.
Cool. See, that's amazing. So that's an example of something they didn't have before that is much needed. And I'm so happy that they are accommodating for those situations going forward. So before we get into the race recap, EmKay, tell me just like how the atmosphere was here, because you were at this race last year. EmKay won the 25K and set the course record on the older course because they did reroute all of the courses this year to end in downtown. So having that experience and then going back to it this year, what was exciting? How are the conditions, etc.?
The finish line feel moving it to Auburn was super cool because last year, like the way that it worked was there was the 100K course and everybody ran the 100K course, but they just stopped at their distance. So like the 25K stopped at the 25K aid station and the 50K stopped at the 50K aid station, which is like kind of cool. But like I remember finishing and there was just so much chaos of like, oh, you're a finisher, but you're a 50K athlete, so you keep going, that like there was kind of a celebration, but there wasn't like much other than just like confusion. And so this year, finishing downtown, it was like, this is a finish line. People are here cheering. People are excited. And it was busy down there like pretty much all day, even though it was scorching hot. In terms of conditions, I remember starting the 25K last year at 7:30 in the morning, and I had a jacket on and I didn't want to take it off because I was like, I'm so cold. And this year we started, I did the 50K. So I started at 6 a.m. and I was already like a little balmy and the sun wasn't even up. So it was a very different day, much hotter, but people survived. The 100-miler had an insane amount of DNFs actually. But the 100K and the 50K went pretty well. I did actually get caught behind a med flight in the last 3 miles, which was kind of crazy. There was somebody being med flighted off of the course. I hope they're okay. But my guess is that it was probably a 100-mile athlete, 3 miles from the finish line.
Dang.
Such a bummer.
Yeah. I hope that athlete and their family are doing okay. That's really scary. The heat is something to never take lightly, that's for sure. And to try and be ready for it in whatever way you can. And then we're lucky enough that if, things go south, sounds like they had a great medical team ready to treat anyone.
It was so efficient too. It was
Yeah.
crazy how fast they got that person on the stretcher and lift them in the air.
How was the water? Was there like water crossings and streams and stuff?
There was not a single water crossing on the 50K. I was really hoping for one so I could splash myself a couple times. Dang. There may have been one in the last, right where that med flight happened, because I rolled my ankle in it, trying to pass people, but that's the only creek that I remember.
Yeah.
But they did have sponges at aid stations, which was much needed. I appreciated that.
Dang, what a night and day difference from seeing the conditions at Way Too Cool and Formidable, where the water was, waist high, almost stomach high at some points, to now. Dang.
I was hoping for it.
You were hoping for it. I'm sure you were, along with everyone else. Okay, so as far as the Canyons 25K goes, this didn't automatically get athletes into one of those UTMB races, but what's great is they picked up 2 stones. And so on the men's side, the winner was Drew McComber. He was first in 1:32:36, and he was followed by Will Fuchs and Ezekiel Paluzak. Something else to note is that this year there was a lot of international competitors, which was really cool because it was a major. On the female side, there was Alexandra Harris. She won in 1:52:45. I actually hadn't heard about her before this race, so congrats to Alexandra from 2 former Canyons 25K winners. That's a great time for this time of the year. Kenzie MacPhail was second. And what was pretty cool is she got 7th last year when you were racing. So it's always nice to come back to a race and then do better. And then Ashley Hawks, who is Hayden Hawks' partner, she's always mixing it up in these shorter distances. And I love how they make it like a family affair with like their kids and stuff, and they each race. So congrats to Ashley.
Yeah. And we also thought we would go ahead and tell you guys all the people who qualified for OCC. I have a feeling that a handful of these people may not run OCC because they're running things like UTMB or Western States, but they do have the opportunity if they want to. So on the men's side, we have Hayden Hawks winning the race, Jeshurun Small in second, Eric LaPuma in third, and then Matt Seidel, Nick Handel, Alex Parker, Chris Jones, Michelle Merito, Rod Farvard, and Corbin John. Those are your top 10 men from the Canyons 50K. And then on the women's side, Heather Jackson won the race. Kaitrona Jennings was second. I was third. And then after that, it's Megan Rowland, Robin Lesh, Tessa Chesser, Abby Levine, Melody Gilbert, Zuzana Trinkova, and Erica Flowers. So we'll see some of those people at OCC maybe.
Yeah. And this was from, following along. This was one of my favorite races to follow. Obviously, I had some personal interest with EmKay. My friend Rod was in there as well as Tessa. So cheering them on and watching their little dots. The results were like a little delayed here and there. So it was hard to feel exactly what that action was. I was out running, so unfortunately I couldn't be tuning into the live stream. But Hayden, I thought this was actually a great win for him. I wouldn't expect anything less, but you never know how your legs are going to be when you're training for longer races. So Hayden, again, just rounding out how versatile he is as a trail athlete. Jeshurun, he's actually a Tarek's teammate, and I was so excited to see him mixing it up there, helping to push the pace a little bit. And then Eric LaPuma, Matt Seidel, it was cool to see them up there too. Rod, my friend, just special shout out. He took a wrong turn and he was up in that kind of 3rd, 4th position as well. But that just comes with this sport. And then on the female side, EmKay, you want to give a little bit of color there as to how that race unfolded?
Yeah, Heather Jackson is just like Hayden Hawks, in the depths of training for Western States, but also Unbound Gravel, which is, I'm pretty sure, 150 or 200 mile gravel bike race, which I think is 2 weeks before Western States. So she's crazy, crazy good. And very strong. Like when she left me on the climb, I was like, yeah, today is not the day for this. Like, see you later. I had a feeling I was never going to see her again. And then Katrina Jennings is actually an Olympian, an Irish Olympian in the marathon. When she passed me on the road downhill portion at the end, I thought she was in a different race. So she crushed. I was trying to catch her at the end and she heard me coming and just like, boom, gone. And I was like, okay, I tried my best. And Megan Rolland is actually a former steeplechase standout. I know she was at the trials and US championships multiple times for the steeple, mom of 3. And I think this is maybe her first 50K. She's been doing a lot of shorter things and has been crushing. So it was fun to see her out there as well.
Yeah, it's I will say it seemed like Hoka kind of had wins all across the board this weekend. And this 50K, that's 1-2 for them and a 1 on the men's side. So they definitely showed up for this major this past weekend. Nice. All right. So then next up was the Calamarro Skyrace. This was the first race of the Sky Running series, a series that we covered in our kind of like trail running series overview. That was one of our first episodes. And so this race was bittersweet, I would say for me. The sweetness was Iris has just been like going after sky racing as hard as she could. And it was so cool just to like see her finally win one of those like bridesmaids moment, always the bridesmaid, never the bride situations. And so I was just so happy for her. And she's such a sweet person. She does like a lot of cool like paragliding and stuff like that too. Marcella was second. She's also a woman who's very prominent in the Golden Trail series. She was second. Ikram Rasala from Spain, she was third. And then the bitter side was Elsie, someone else who we have raced against before in the Golden Trail series. She was actually leading the whole thing. And sadly, she fainted like with a couple miles to go because the heat, like canyons, was just crazy this weekend. And so she unfortunately didn't even finish the race. So I hope that her recovery is going well.
So I actually think that Iris was leading most of the race, but Elsie like ran a tactical race and passed her at the last aid station and then passed out.
Oh, okay. Dang.
Yeah. Oh. So she was like gunning for that win and then oof. Hopefully she's okay.
Yeah.
And then on the men's side, Antonio Martinez Perez from Spain won that race. Daniel Osans, who is a name that I'm sure a lot of people know. He's an Adidas Terex athlete. He's won a lot of races this last year. He also was like gunning, leading the race, and then like stumbled into the finish line and held on for second place because of the heat. And then Frederic Trenchant from France, I'm sure I said that wrong, was third place. So that's our first Skyrace series of the year. And we were a little confused when we went through this series, like when we were explaining how to qualify and stuff earlier. But I did see that the top 20 people in this race were awarded points to their overall ranking for the year. And prize money was awarded to the top 10. I don't know what that prize money was, but it went all the way through top 10.
Nice. Yeah. I think I saw a picture that Iris was holding that maybe it was like a little over 2,000 euros for first place, maybe like 2,600 or something like that. So USD somewhere between 2 and 3K maybe. But yeah, that is not confirmed, just a guess. But that's good. Hopefully too, as the series goes on, we gain more and more clarity on the series. This race also was in Spain, so that's probably assuming why, aside from the fact that the Spaniards are incredible sky runners, that they took a lot of those podium spots. And then the next race is in 2 weekends, and this is in France, and this is the Skyrace. Mathesines. I'm sorry for people listening. France, please correct us. And I believe Lindsay Webster is running that, and she was the champion last year. And I'm pretty sure Shayla Alviez, who's my teammate on Terex, is also running it. So that'll be a really cool matchup because Shayla was the previous champ like multiple times in a row, and she didn't really do it last year. So I really hope that they're both on that start line so we can follow the action.
Yeah. She was hurt last year for a lot of it, right?
Yes, like the beginning of the year, and then she crushed OCC.
Yeah. Cool.
As in she won.
Yes. Well, the most exciting of all the races that happened this week, maybe not the most exciting, but we were excited about it because we got to be a part of it too.
It was the most exciting.
Yeah, it was. These short races are just like so fun to watch because like the vertical day was 32 minutes long and the up down was an hour long. So it was like perfectly digestible. But Sunapee Scramble happened this weekend. Day 1, U.S. Vertical Championships. Day 2, U.S. Up Down Championships. Dani, what happened in the vertical race?
Madness. I'm sure Francisco Pupi will appreciate that phrase. Yeah, there was so much on the line, right? So not only the U.S. like earning that title as the U.S. champion, but people are trying to get those spots on Team USA. And I feel, especially after Thailand at the end of last year, there's even more hype around it because the World Championships are kind of getting their stuff together, and there's like more live streaming and excitement around it. So on the first day, the USVK Championship, also you can still watch this on YouTube. The U.S. team was that people that earned their spots were Joe Gray, Dan Kurtz, Eddie Owens, and Garrett Corcoran. Sorry, Garrett. And that's a great team. I'm really excited about that. I feel like we covered most of those guys in our preview. For Joe Gray, this is like his millionth U.S. title. To me, just continues to be impressive. That he's been able to have this reign of championships for pretty much over a decade at this point. I don't know. What was your most exciting thing about that, EmKay?
It just seemed like the men's race was so insanely close. Like Alex Ricard actually won the race. He's from Canada. He's from Canada. So he obviously did not make the U.S. team, but so he finished in 32:12. Joe Gray finished in 32:23. I heard that he slipped and fell, so it was probably even closer up until that point. And then after that, it was 28, 40, 43, 53. So like these guys were so close the whole time. And so that was just, it's cool to like have that kind of density in a race, especially a race that short.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm going to confirm that Joe, this is his 23rd win. There's so many people who will never win a national championship, and Joe Gray has just got his 23rd win. There's people entering the sport right now who are younger than the amount of wins that Joe Gray has.
Yeah. Joe Gray is the king of sub ultra in the US for sure.
Yeah. And one of the most widely recognized names in the world for sub ultra. And as far as the VK course, what I really liked about this one is it had so much variety. And so that part that I think Joe probably fell on, people, please look at that YouTube because it is very, very technical. It was, if you looked at the profile and say you were like a downhiller and you're like, okay, I'm going to see if I can make up time. It was so short, so technical, so punchy that like people were just flying. And then it was over like that and you're climbing again. And I personally can't imagine doing that brain switch. Like you're jamming up this fire road and then immediately it's like East Coast technical trails for like a couple minutes and then you're jamming up again. Yeah, very, very impressive.
Yeah. And the conditions were terrible both days. Well, at least coming from like somebody who lives on the West Coast and doesn't deal with humidity. But it was wet. It was cold. It was windy. So the trails were just muck also.
That was a good race. You want to say the females that made the USA team?
Yeah. So for our women's vertical team, Allie Mack already obviously made the team because she was our world champion last year. So there were only 3 spots up for grabs, and those were taken by Grayson Murphy, who would have been 13th in the men's field. Like, she demolished that race. Rachel Tomajic and Alex Lawson, who is on the trail team, rounded out those second and third places in the race. It was just insane how, like, we know how dominant Grayson is, but just to like see her race the men too is like so fun.
And they were in separate races. Like, they weren't even racing each other.
She's pushing herself.
Yeah. So Grayson's time was 35:47, and the next woman, respectively, was then 40:28, and then it went 41:03. So those were the top 3 spots. She had almost a 5-minute lead. She didn't need to push that hard, but she just like kept grinding. It'd be interesting to hear like what her goals for this race were, besides, making Team USA, if she saw it as like a hard workout or like a good fitness indicator or something like that going before she finishes off her training for Worlds. But yeah, needless to say, our VK team, if I was the rest of the world, I'd be aware. I don't want to say scared. Maybe scared. This is a very, very strong team. Allie and Grayson. Yeah, Rachel, Alex, like EmKay mentioned, we actually have an interview with her. My surprised, but not. But I'm becoming like a bigger fan is Rachel. Like, I knew she would be in the mix, but before we get into the next day, like her whole weekend, I thought was just like a great weekend. And I think she's like a really good testament to that. Like, sometimes it just takes, she was already doing great, but she's just getting better and better and better. And like, that's usually the more typical trajectory of an athlete if they just like stick with it. So I was really happy to see her get that second spot on the day.
Yeah. And Rachel was also on the team last year. She was on that gold medal vertical team with Allie Mack and Lauren Gregory. So
yeah,
super cool to see her back on the team.
Totally.
All right. And then day 2 was the US Up Down Mountain Championships, which Dani and I live streamed, commentated. So like, if you're, bored this week and want to hear us talk some more, that's up on YouTube. It was so much fun to be a part of that. And starting with the men's race. So the men's race started first at 11 o'clock. The women's race was going to start 30 minutes later. And Dan Kurtz, U.S. champion in the up down this year, finished his first lap 10 seconds before the women's race started. It was so cool. He was not in the lead on the way up. I think he probably, because we couldn't see them for quite a while, my guess is that he made his move on the first downhill. And then he dominated the race from that moment on. Like, there was never anybody else that was going to touch him. So our men's team is Dan Kurtz, Morgan Elliott, Liam Mayrow, and Eddie Owens. And again, another awesome team. Like, those dudes were battling all day. That course was insane. It was so fast on the way up. It was a fire road, and then straight onto this like 1.5 mile boggy, mossy, wet technical section that just like was not a trail. It was a choose your own line. Watching them run that downhill hurt my ankles.
No, 100%.
Yeah.
I was very impressed with Dan coming back the next day and winning in the dominant fashion that he did. I personally don't know a lot about Dan, but just watching him on the live stream, he looked so smooth on that downhill. Like, I'd love to see him in like a Skyrace or more European races, because I really do think he could hold his own with, the Europeans just have a reputation for their downhill skills. But yeah, he was just cruising on that downhill. I actually watched
East Coast local. So like, he's used to that local technical. So he did great in European downhills. Yeah.
Yeah. I watched the preview. So that's also up on YouTube for anyone. And he's just like a funny guy. everything he was saying. I was just like, I want people to hear more from him on like podcasts and stuff, because he definitely has a pretty funny personality, in the best way possible. Like he seems like a very interesting person. And then we had Morgan Elliott, and like EmKay said, and Liam, and then Eddie also came and made his second team the next day. So from the VK to the US up down on the men, both Dan and Eddie are going to be doubling, which I think is super interesting. And then obviously the other players are just be doing one event.
Yeah. And those races have a 2-day break in between, which last year they only had 1 day in between. So it'll be fun to see people with that extra little day of recovery coming back. And the women's team.
Yeah, the women. So Grayson came back and she doubled, taking the US champion crown for both the VK and the up down. Allie Mack actually sat out on the VK day, I think more so because she already has a spot. And so she came in second. Rachel came in third. So she earned herself another Team USA spot in addition to the VK. And then Casey Enman came out and rounded up the top 4. This race, it was like had so many different emotions, right? I feel like there was a lot of hype, not only from us, but from different media outlets about Allie and Grayson finally racing. So it was really exciting to just see them both take off the line and going head to head, because to me, they have very similar racing styles. Like they get out hot, and more times than not, they hold that very well. And then Grayson started pulling away already by that first uphill.
Yeah, I was surprised to see them come to that summit aid station and only see Grayson, because Allie ran a really strong race the whole time, but like the two of them were motoring together the last time we had seen them before that.
Yeah, 100%. And so Grayson definitely made a move at that point. And then
she never looked back.
She never looked back. She came through the start line, which is also the finish line, because again, this was 2 loops. And she probably had almost 2 minutes on Allie at that point. And then when they hit the summit again, it seemed like Allie was closing the gap a little bit. But then Grayson just like extended even more by the end. And I highly recommend checking out Grayson's lap splits, not splats, on the live streams, because it's very impressive. Like her spread was smaller than Dan's, as far as like each lap that she was hitting.
But the most exciting race of the day was the race for third. Rachel and Casey were neck and neck for the whole first lap. They ran together, and the entire ascent, when we saw them at the summit camera, Casey had actually made a little bit of a gap, like maybe 3 seconds on Rachel, and Rachel tripped, but she got up, she kept going, and she must have just like made a hard move on that downhill. But Casey didn't let up, because I think Rachel only beat her by like 5 seconds. It wasn't that big of a gap. So they were battling each other all day. And Casey Enman is 43 years old. She's a 2011 world champion, and she just made another US team.
Yeah.
So strong.
If that doesn't inspire you, I don't know what will. It's similar to Joe. I just think what's really impressive is that Casey has also stayed in these shorter distances pretty much her whole career. She's done some like 50Ks here and there, but I would say 90%, 95% of her races have been in the sub ultra distance. And we keep talking, we as a trail community, how many fast runners are coming into the sport, yet Casey is like still in the mix. I just find that incredibly inspiring personally.
Yeah, it was cool to watch.
Yeah.
I'm excited about that team too. So the women's team, Grayson, Allie, and Rachel are all doubling. And then our 4th athletes will be just doing it the one race.
Yeah. And I will say too, with the women's team, 3 of them are former world champs. I don't know how many countries can say that. Grayson, Allie, and Casey. And yeah, Allie didn't win this time. But to me, it's really like an iron sharpens iron situation. I don't want to put words into either of their mouths, but I'm sure Grayson is thinking, all right, how can I keep this gap on Allie? And Allie's thinking how she's going to close the gap on Grayson. So it's going to be a really exciting individual race. And I think that is going to elevate Team USA even more as a team. So I think I'm really excited to watch them at Worlds.
Me too.
Yeah.
So that concludes our team qualification for the vertical and up down. It was just one race and done. So the final US qualifying comes up this weekend in Beacon, New York at the Breakneck Trail Marathon. And this race is so like surprisingly steeper than I thought when I was hearing about it at the beginning. Dani and I were looking over the stats for this race, and it's just over marathon, 26.4 miles, but 8,600 feet of gain, which is really actually kind of hard to find here in the US outside of something that's, above like 8,000 feet.
Oh, 100%. Before this too, we were just talking about like major props to the USATF mountain running committee / board for, I think these are great races for picking our best teams going into Austria. I personally have never done a marathon in the US that has that much gain. Mm-hmm. And it just from seeing the pictures and stuff from last year, like we know it's technical, not only because it's on the East Coast, but just in this specific area. So yeah, I hope that these runners also have some baked in recovery before Austria, because just looking at this makes my quads hurt.
And it's only a month later, like a month a day or something.
Yeah, no, definitely. Something interesting too about this upcoming race weekend is, so the trail marathon is actually the Trail Marathon National Championship. So like this past weekend, the winner will be crowned the USA champion. That's not always the case with selection races. For example, Lake Sonoma was a selection for the longer trail team, but it wasn't a national championship. So I think that makes it a little extra cool that by the end you're crowned that champion. And so there is some prize money as well. First place is going to get $1,000, second place $500, and third $250. $1,000 for a US championship is pretty good these days. And then what's interesting is that the marathon is actually sponsored by Nike, and the half is sponsored by Salomon, because that is part of the Golden Trail National Series. So this is going to be a really fun weekend to watch these two races.
Yeah, I feel like anything that USATF touches has to be like sponsored by Nike, probably.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the first time I've ever seen this. So I'm like, is the finish line going to be like Nike / Salomon, or what's it going to look like?
Definitely some competing brands going on there. It's just they completely tear down the setup for Nike and set up the Salomon. Although I think I was talking to a friend, and I think those races like start at the same time. So that would be impossible.
Totally. Wow, that's fascinating. They start at the same time.
Yeah. So do we want to like talk about who we think might make the team?
Yeah, let's go for it.
So just a reminder, we've talked about this before, but top two at this race make the 40K short trail team. And then the final spot will be picked by resume. So my picks for the women's team as of right now are Claire Rhodes and Bailey Kowalczyk. We have not seen Bailey race yet this year, but she had a killer year last year on the Golden Trail Series. She did race at Gorge. She won the 30K. And Bailey she crushed last year. Her training has been really good. It's been really consistent from what I've seen on Strava. And so I'm excited to see her on this course, especially because she's really good at like technical running. And my other pick, Claire Rhodes, she was third place at Formidable behind Kimber and myself. And she was in that race the entire time. Like, there was definitely a point in the race where I thought that Claire was going to be on the team and it was not going to be me. And so She lives in Reno now, so I've been seeing a lot of her training in person, but also from afar. And she's just really fit right now. She was the Moab Trail Marathon champion last fall, and she won the North Face Half Marathon against Brittany Charbonneau just a couple weeks ago as like a tune-up race. So I'm so stoked to see those two athletes race.
Yeah, I think those are great picks. On my end, for the women, I also have Bailey, just having competed against her myself and just knowing what her experience is, especially in Europe. I think this course very much suits her. She's probably done at least 5 versions of, around 8,000 feet for a marathon at this point. And her win at the Gorge, she just seemed to be on fire. And I know she really wants to make this team. And so I feel like that's extra fuel to the fire for Bailey. And also, since it's like sponsored by Nike and she recently signed with Nike, I'm sure she's extra excited out there to represent the brand. And then I'm going to make it a little controversial and I'm going to choose Brittany for making the team. I think Claire is also a very strong runner as well. I was very impressed with her run at Formidable, hanging with Kimber and EmKay for so long. But I'm going to say Brittany just because she recently lost to her, is maybe, gunning for that rematch and wanting to earn that spot. But I do anticipate maybe Brittany and Claire kind of going back and forth for some time. And potentially 2 other women that I think will be in the mix. Sam Lewis, she's been on the USA team before, actually a couple times for the shorter course teams. She actually competed this past weekend and unfortunately didn't make either team. So I could see a little bit more fire there also. And then Christina Mascarenas, she was on the team last year. She won Pikes Peak Marathon. So she may also be itching for a rematch with Brittany. So maybe there's a little bit of a love competition triangle with Claire, Brittany, and Christina at this race.
Yeah. And I think another name to look for would be Britta Clark as well. She competed pretty well at CCC last year. So she's, run on those European trails. She's probably pretty good at technical stuff. And she also she got second at the Ragged 50K last year, which is not the same race, but a similar kind of feel, terrain. I guess. Yeah, terrain.
East Coast. Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah. Well, I can say personally, watching all these races between last weekend and this weekend, I definitely am having some FOMO. But just from the names that we're reading, I am so excited for our potential fully equipped 40K team after this weekend.
Yeah, for sure. And then on the men's side, this one was harder for me because Max King was not the Max King that I thought he was going to be this weekend. And that may very well be because he was planning on coming back this week and like knocking it out of the park. But I do have Max King making this team, as well as Jackson Brill. He was 6th at Broken Arrow last year, the 48K, which was like fairly competitive because it was a selection race for the 80K team last year. So I'm curious to see how he does on this terrain, but I think that he can do a pretty good job. And I think he's my second place.
I think those are both great choices. Yeah, Max kind of made like a hard push the last downhill of the up down, but he didn't have enough real estate to really catch too many people. So he missed out on a spot there. I also have him here because he won last year. Like he won this race. He knows what it takes. He actually passed someone, I think like in the last mile or so to win. And so having course knowledge is something that, you should take definitely as like a strong indicator, I think. I had a hard time picking my number 2. 2 names that kind of came up are Garrett Corcoran and Morgan Elliott. We don't know if they're racing. If they are, they will definitely be in the mix, but they just both made teams this past weekend. So maybe, this was a sign up if that didn't happen. TBD, if they end up racing, maybe they might just race it because it's a national championship and then say no to the spot. We'll see. That being said, there's been people in the past that do the short course and also do the 40K. And I think one of the most famous doubles was David Sinclair. He placed like top 5 in both, or top 10. And so it is doable. It definitely is doable if you have the right training and everything. So who knows? Garrett and Morgan might be going for that as well.
Yeah,
Some other
definitely be up in they'd definitely be up in my top mix as well if they decide to race.
Yeah. A couple other names that kind of came to mind besides Jackson Brill, Patrick Curran. He's an East Coast native, just looks like he's done a lot of races on these types of courses, which I think is a huge advantage. Mike Sansiri, he also raced this past weekend and didn't make a team. So we'll see if he'll be returning this week. Do you have anything else on Mike?
Yeah, Mike has won Speed Goat as well as the Rut. And he was 7th overall at Broken Arrow last year, which was a qualifying race.
Nice. So he's very used to this kind of mountainous terrain as well. Yeah. The Rut especially. And I've heard Speed Goat is very technical. So that will probably play to his favor. Michael Lipsy hasn't done this distance, but he won the 21K before, or he's raced it before. Stephen Kerr. Matt Lipsy, sorry. Yeah. Stephen Kerr finished 6th at this race last year when it was a qualifier. So again, having that course knowledge. And then Stephen Lange was kind of the last one that stuck out to us. He won the 21K version of this race last year. So it's his first time doing the full marathon. But again, just lots of guys with course knowledge, which that's definitely not the case on the female side as much in kind of like that front bunch. So that'll be interesting to see how kind of like the front goes out and like how they adjust accordingly.
Yeah. And if we've learned anything from like watching these East Coast races, you can never count out a local. Yeah. Like their trail knowledge and their ability to like move quickly over those roots and rocks is just, it's unreal. Yeah. So I think it's going to be a really exciting race. Do we know if there's a live stream for that? I don't think there is. I think it's just.
I haven't seen anything yet.
Live tracking. It's probably one of those things that's just like, there's no service out there. And I mean, it was like Canyons this weekend. They were like, we're going to do a live stream. And I don't think there was any live streaming actually happening because just terrible service for these mountain races, but we'll figure it out one day.
No, 100%. So there is live coverage. It's going to be on YouTube. So we'll make sure to put those in the show notes. It's 6:15, but that is Eastern time. So it is going to be a little bit later here on.
No, earlier, 3:15 a.m.
Oh, earlier. Sorry. Yeah. On the West Coast, we were a little bit spoiled with Sunapee because again, those races are so short that they are able to push them back. Which I think actually would play to the favor with like the weather in some instances. So yeah, it looks like it'll be on YouTube. So that's very exciting.
Yeah. So hopefully we'll be coming to you guys next week with some new Team USA results.
Yeah. All right. That wraps it up. Thanks again for listening to the Sub Hub Pod brought to you by Freetrail.